Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
Hey, we're wandering through the 7 ancient wonders. Day 1, we spent some time on 3 of them. The Great Pyramid of Giza, which is the only one that still is standing today. It's also the oldest. There's the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which sounds like a really cool garden that had a very sophisticated irrigation system. Remember, we're talking about a really hot desert area where there's not a lot of water. So they would have needed a good way to water all those plants, and that was through an irrigation system. Then we've got the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, and it was in Turkey, or modern Turkey is where it was, and it was built entirely of white marble. But they tell us it was destroyed several times and then rebuilt. But sadly, they had too many floods and fires and wars. So if you want to see some fragments or small pieces that have been left behind, go to England and to the British Museum. Lastly, on day 1, we had the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Olympia doesn't exist anymore. It was an ancient city, but it was the site of the first Olympic Games, and it used to house a 12-meter statue of the king of the ancient Greek gods. Of course, that's Zeus, very important man in Greek mythology. And the statue and its throne were decorated with gold and ivory. We learned that Zeus was so big, he barely fit in. But sadly, that statue has been destroyed. We're not really sure how exactly. What are we doing today, Tom?
Well, we've got 3 more ancient wonders of the ancient world. We've got the mausoleum at Halicarnassus to talk about. We're also going to talk about the Colossus of Rhodes and the lighthouse of Alexandria. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's dive right in and listen to today's lesson from top to bottom. Though the pyramid at Giza is the only ancient wonder to remain physically, the others have touched our culture in different ways. Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. As a powerful regional ruler in what is now Turkey, Mausolus built himself a magnificent capital at Halicarnassus. As he was used to luxury in life, no doubt he'd want the same in death. Thus, his wife Artemisia ordered an enormous 3-level marble tomb built for him after his passing. Sadly, it likely crumbled due to earthquakes in medieval times. Its legacy remains today in the use of the word mausoleum for large tombs. Colossus of Rhodes. This gigantic statue, built around 282 BC, stood for only 60 years. Built to honor a military victory, the Colossus was a 32-meter-tall sculpture of the sun god Helios that overlooked the harbor of Rhodes. An earthquake brought it tumbling down, but it lay in pieces on the ground for another 800 years, where visitors would still come to see what had once stood so tall. It was eventually sold for scrap in the 7th century. Lighthouse of Alexandria. Many boats had to steer through shallow waters as they entered the harbor of Alexandria. To light the path, a massive 140-meter lighthouse was constructed on the nearby island of Pharos. The tower could allegedly be seen from about 48 kilometers away. Unfortunately, like many of the other wonders, the lighthouse was also brought down by earthquakes. However, Egypt's government announced its intentions in 2015 to rebuild this ancient wonder. Though little is left of these 7 wonders now, the fact that we still remember them today brings to mind how grand they must have been. Hopefully, they can still bring a sense of wonder to you, too.
Okay, guys, day 2, and we're still wandering through the 7 ancient wonders. We had 4 on day 1, and we've got the remaining 3 today. So, though the pyramid at Giza is the only ancient wonder to remain physically, you can actually go and see that one. It's in pretty good shape. It has shrunk a tad or a little bit due to erosion, but it's still pretty impressive. These others are in bits and pieces, and some you can see some of the fragments, but that's all, which is so sad. But you know what? You can go on the internet and through research and reading some of the ancient records, we've got artists who have artists rendering what they think it might have looked like when it was still intact. So you can kind of guess or get a good idea of what some of these wonders look like when they were still in good shape. Now, the first one we get to here is the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. That's hard to say. Halicarnassus mausoleum. Today, when I see the word mausoleum, I always think of a tomb or where someone has been buried, and they're pretty important, and so they usually get their own building or a place where their body lays. They don't have to be around other people. They're usually some sort of pharaoh or king or queen, something like that. So a mausoleum. Mausoleum is just a building. It's especially large. It's very extravagant, and like I said, it was usually built for someone who had a lot of power and wealth. So this is located at a place called Halicarnassus. Let's find out more about that.
Yeah, I believe that was an ancient Greek city, which is in Turkey now. There's a different city there now, of course, but there was a mausoleum there at one time, a big tomb for a hotshot kind of guy. And as a powerful regional ruler in what is now Turkey, Mausolus built himself a magnificent capital at Halicarnassus. So that's what he did. He was a powerful ruler, and he had a big ego to boot to match that. So, of course, he built himself a big capital, a magnificent capital city. And magnificent just means really wonderful, really cool, really great. Gee, we have lots of words to describe things that are really cool, really great. Magnificent, outstanding, fantastic, wonderful, awesome, etc.
Yeah.
Magnificent is just another of those words.
Yeah. It makes me think of Huang Di. You know, when he died, he built himself a pretty special place, too. So while Mausolus was alive, he built himself a beautiful city. It was the capital. And as he was used to luxury in life, he wanted the same in death. So luxury here is one of our vocabulary words. It just means great comfort, someone who is living quite extravagantly, spending quite a bit. Luxury models, luxury brands would include things like, you know, the Benz or BMW or a Ferrari if you're into sports cars. For the women, some of the luxury brands are LV, as you know. Some of them I didn't even know how to pronounce because they're foreign. But Pravda, is it Prada? Prada.
Yep.
We have a lot of luxury brands right here in Taipei. If you go shopping, you can see them.
Yeah, human beings, of course, always need a reason to feel they're better than their fellow human beings. So we need these luxury things just to let us know that, hey, I'm better than you. So, of course, this leader was better than everybody else. So he built himself a magnificent capital, and he enjoyed luxury in life. So, of course, he wanted the same in death. He wanted to have those things when he died. Thus, or therefore, his wife, Artemisia, ordered an enormous 3-level marble tomb built for him after his passing. So, yes, I want to do right by my dear husband. I'm going to build him a great mausoleum, or at least a big tomb. I don't think they called it that yet because, he just died there. But it was going to be pretty big. Enormous means really big in size, and it was actually 3 levels, okay? So maybe they were going to bury his feet on one level and his stomach on another level and his head. No, of course not. But, of course, it was a big marble tomb. It was built for him after he died, after he passed away.
Sadly, it likely, or most likely, crumbled due to earthquakes in medieval times. Yeah, they still have a lot of earthquakes in that area of the world. To crumble just means to kind of be forced or pressured into something that just breaks apart into small pieces or fragments. We'll often talk about buildings crumbling as they get older and there's some sort of earthquake or disaster, they crumble to the ground. Or if someone faints, you could say, oh, she had some bad news and she crumbled to the ground. She fainted and fell on the floor. So crumble, again, it just means to break or fall apart, usually into very small pieces or fragments. We learned that word fragments earlier. So yeah, they had a lot of earthquakes then as they do today. And its legacy remains today in the use of the word mausoleum for large tombs. That word didn't even exist until this man, Mausolus, lived and built himself, or his wife built for him, this gigantic tomb. That's where the word mausoleum comes from. It's named after this man, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see these kinds of mausoleums in various parts of the world. I think there's one for Mao Zedong in China. There's one for Lenin in Russia. I think it still exists. And I think there was one for Mr. Zhang here in Taiwan. I'm not sure if it still exists out there in Taoyuan, but... Or Daxi, is it? I think that's where the mausoleum was there. But in any case, that's a subject for another day. Let's move on to the next wonder of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. Colossus usually refers to something quite big, except we use the adjectival form, colossal. Wow, that was a colossal earthquake. It was really, really big.
Huge, yeah.
But in this particular case, it's referring to a really, really big statue.
Yeah, Colossus of Rhodes. So this was a gigantic statue. Gigantic is very similar to enormous. So you'll just want to remember that those two words are synonyms. It was built around 282 BC. Unfortunately, it was only around for 60 years. That doesn't sound like a very long life. It was built to honor a military victory, so the army must have beaten somebody. The Colossus was a 32-meter-tall sculpture of the sun god. Wow! The sun god is Helios, and it overlooked the harbor of Rhodes. So when you overlook something, it means you're at a high advantage. You're probably looking from the mountaintop over into the valley. So something overlooks. Maybe there's a home on that mountain and it overlooks the city below. Overlook. It also can mean, guys, that you fail to see something. Maybe you just didn't see it or you're neglecting it. I overlook the fact that I had forgotten my car keys when I walked out the door to go to work. So I had to return to my apartment and get my keys. Overlook. But here it actually does mean something that's very tall. It's at a higher vantage point where it can see over something, has a view of something from above.
Yeah, we have something like that here in Taiwan. There's a statue of Guanshi in Pusa overlooking the harbor at Geelong. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in today's lesson. We'll continue talking about the Colossus of Rhodes and the Lighthouse of Alexandria in just a few seconds, but let's hear from our Chinese teacher now.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们昨天带大家看了4个古代的7大奇景，其中的4个。那么接着呢，我们今天还有3个古代世界的7大奇景。那么不过在一开始的时候啊，我们还是有特别提到，就是说虽然吉萨金字塔是现在唯一保留的一个这个古代的奇景，但是其他6个虽然都消失不见了，但他们的奇观其实有影响到我们的文化。好，那么接下来我们就看一下第4个7大奇景咯。第4个是什么呢？第4个是 Mausoleum 王他的陵墓。这个 Mausoleum 王呢，其实它是位于现在的土耳其的地方，他之前是一个很强大地区的统治者。不过这个国王啊，为了他自己建造一个很宏伟的首都，而且他很习惯了奢华的生活，所以他也希望他死后也可以过着很奢华的生活。好，我们在这一段当中，第一句有先看到第一个字的 as， 这里的 as 呢是介系词，表示身为、作为什么样身份的意思。但是第2句话的第一个字也是 as， 在英文当中的 as， 如果后面有看到动词，例如现在这句话的 as he was used to， be used to 就是习惯了什么东西。不过因为有主词动词的关系，这里的 as 一定是连接词。那么连接词的 as 有3种意思，第一种 because 表原因，第2 when 表时间。第三，有可能是如同好像。那么你只能根据上下文来推断它的意思。在第二句话当中，应该是表示原因，因为他习惯了奢华的生活，所以他也希望在死后过着奢华的生活。那么所以就是因为这个原因，他的妻子 Artemisia 就在他过世之后呢，帮他定做了一个巨大的3层的大理石的陵墓。那么不过很可惜的呢，可能是因为在中世纪有地震啦，所以它整个就 crumble 了，就崩解了。不过它的历史遗产到现在仍然保留在 mausoleum 这个词当中。好，接下来我们看下一个奇景咯，就是 Rhodes 在罗德岛当中的太阳神雕像。不过呢，当时是为了要纪念军事的胜利，所以建造了这个巨像，它有32公尺这么样的高哦。好，我们看一下接下来的第二句是个分词构句，因为一开始呢，我们又突然出现了 PP， 这个 PP 就表示被动，那么真正的主词就会在后面逗点 the Colossus 这个地方，所以其实built 它是一个分词构句，被建造 built 什么被建造呢？逗点之后 the Colossus 这个太阳神铜像，其实当时被建造的目的 to honor a military victory。 好，逗点之后呢，句子才接着完整的陈述这个文意。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue talking about 7 wonders of the ancient world. So far today, we've talked about a big mausoleum at Halicarnassus. I hope I said that right. And we just began to talk about Colossus of Rhodes, or the Colossus of Rhodes. And again, this was a gigantic statue built around 282 BC, but it was only standing for about 60 years, and it was built to honor a military victory. But it was really, really tall, and it was a sculpture of the sun god Helios, and it overlooked the harbor of Rhodes. But an earthquake brought it tumbling down. But it lay in pieces on the ground for another 800 years, where visitors would still come to see what had once stood so tall. Nowadays, of course, we've got statues that can withstand earthquakes. So I believe I mentioned this earlier, the large statue of the Buddha down there in Kaohsiung. It's still standing, and even earthquakes won't knock it down because it's built pretty well. Back then, I don't think they had modern construction techniques. They did not have rebars and things like that. So yeah, whenever there was an earthquake, down came those statues.
So sad. Yeah, so once the earthquake caused it to tumble down, it lay in pieces on the ground for another 800 years. And during this time, there were still visitors, that would want to go through and see some of the pieces that had been left on the ground. And imagine in their minds what it must have been like. It was eventually sold for scrap in the 7th century, which just makes me sad. So eventually means after some time passed by, and this happened in the end. So after a long delay or a long process, this finally was the result. So eventually sold it for scrap. You'll often hear us talk about scraps. I'm going to give the scraps to the dog. That's the leftover from dinner, maybe the bones and stuff. We give our dog the scraps from dinner. If you're sewing, ladies or guys, you'll have material scraps left over from whatever you're sewing. Or we'll often talk about scrap metal that will be sold to maybe a dump site or something, scrap metal.
Yeah, here in Taiwan, they used to have these guys coming around in the carts looking for scrap metal. They would say, Pai dia dam weibo. Do you have any scrap metal to sell or something? I haven't heard that announcement
I haven't either.
In a very long time. But in any case here, yes, the Colossus of Rhodes tumbled down in an earthquake, and it stood on the ground as ruins for 800 years, and then all that stuff was eventually sold for scrap. They used it to build other things. Now, the final wonder of the ancient world that we're going to talk about today is called the Lighthouse of Alexandria. And Alexandria, of course, is a city in Egypt. I believe it is on the Mediterranean Sea.
Now, many boats had to steer through shallow waters as they entered the harbor of Alexandria. Now, you know what a lighthouse is, right, guys? It's that structure that's built close to the beach, the edge of the sea. It's usually on a higher level than the beach. And that lighthouse has people manning that position or being there working, and they keep that lighthouse lit. Before there was electricity, they had fire. They used candles and things like that, or a big torch would be lit to warn ships that they were coming too close to the rocks. Sometimes it would be hard for them to see. So we're finding out here that boats had to steer through shallow waters. If the water is shallow, it's not very deep. So that can be very dangerous. If you steer something, you're guiding or controlling the movement of a ship, your car. You can steer your bicycle with the handlebars. We steer lots of things. You can steer an airplane. There are lots of things to steer. Or you can use it more figuratively and just say, my parents helped steer me through my college years and really helped me become successful. So people can help you, guide you by steering you as well.
Yeah, I recall that a container ship had difficulty steering through the Suez Canal a couple of months ago. But in this particular case, we're talking about this lighthouse, and these boats there going to Alexandria had difficulty sailing or steering through those shallow waters as they entered Alexandria Harbor. So to light the path, a massive 140-meter lighthouse was constructed on the nearby island of Pharos. Okay, so indeed this happened back in ancient times, and ships were having trouble steering through those shallow waters. So to light the path, to give them some kind of direction with light there, or maybe some kind of landmark or something, they built this lighthouse there so that the ships could know where exactly they're supposed to sail and not get stuck in the sand.
Wow, it's really tall. It was 140 meters tall, or 40 meters high. 140 meters high. The tower could allegedly be seen from about 48 kilometers away. If someone says allegedly, and then a verb follows, it just says, whatever happened, we don't have proof of it, but we think this is what happened. So someone could say this crime was allegedly committed by this man or this woman. They haven't been convicted yet, but it looks like they're guilty. So, wow, you could see it from a long ways away. Unfortunately, like many of the other wonders, this lighthouse was also brought down by those darn earthquakes. Wow, they really destroyed a lot of wonderful ancient wonders. It says here, however, Egypt's government announced its intentions in 2015. To rebuild this ancient wonder. Yay! So they're going to try to reconstruct it so it looks like it did anciently, which isn't easy. If you have an intention, it just means this is the thing you've intended to do or plan to do. This is a goal that you have, an aim, something that is a target for you to achieve. So those are their intentions. We'll see if they actually fulfill or complete their intentions as they hope to.
Yeah, and they might even use it as an actual lighthouse for ships sailing across the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
And hoping to get to the Suez Canal or something like that. So here's our final paragraph. It says, though little is left of these 7 wonders now, the fact that we still remember them today brings to mind how grand they must have been. And you can look at artists' conceptions, artists' interpretations of those ancient wonders. You can find those pictures on the internet and stuff like that. And of course, you can probably wonder what the modern versions of those wonders are. Yeah, like the Great Wall of China or the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico or Angkor Wat in Cambodia, etc., etc. Those are some wonders of the ancient world that you could talk about. So hopefully all these things can bring a sense of wonder to you too. And they certainly bring a sense of wonder to me.
Cool, me too. Well, that's all the time we have, guys. So we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher one more time, and then we'll be back to say goodbye.
不过因为一场地震把它震倒啦，所以它就变成碎片，然后就在那个地方待了800多年。但是当时游客还是会来看一下曾经矗立的这么高大的一个东西。那么最后呢，还是在7世纪的时候被当成废品出售了。不过我们在同样这一段第3句的地方，这个第3句句子感觉有点长，我们先找第一个逗点后面有一个 but 之后呢，其实文意就出现了一个转折，所以 but 只是连接前后有2个句子而已。不过后面从 but 一直到后面开始的第2个逗点之后的 where 到整个句尾第3句的地方，它其实是一个非限定用法的关系子句。这里的 where 指的是在那个地方，哪个地方呢？其实你往回看就可以看到躺在地上的那些碎片，那么游客就会去观看这些碎片。好，那么接下来看到最后一个奇景咯，是 Alexandra 大灯塔。那因为当时其实有很多的船只在进入 Alexandra 这个 harbor 大港口的时候，不得不经过一个浅水湾。好，那么这样子的话就有点危险咯，所以当时为了要照亮这个通道，就在附近的 Faroes 这个岛上建造了一座140公尺的巨型的一种灯塔。不过根据传说，这个副词可以记一下，叫做allegedly 出现在第3句第4个单字。根据传说，大约48公里以外还可以看到这个岛屿哦。不过很不幸的是，跟其他奇景一样，也被地震来摧毁了。虽然这7个奇景现在已经所剩无几了，不过我们现在还仍然记得它们。那么当时呢，它们一定看起来非常的宏伟哦。我们看一下最后一段的第一句当中看到 little 指的是几乎没有，所以它也算是一个否定字，因为7大奇景现在只剩下一个 Giza 金字塔我们看得到，所以 little is left 几乎没有什么剩下来。不过其实 little 后面接着的是of these 7 wonders， 所以它其实是一个主词被拆开的情况。那么后面我们看到 the fact that the that 是一个连接词，它是没有意义的连接词，它不是关代哦，它其实是连接一个补语，补充说明 the fact 一件事情是什么事情。所以 that 一直到最后面 today 这个地方，我们可以用中括号挂号起来，而句子的主词有点长，从逗点的之后 the fact that 一直到 today 都是这个句子当中的主词。好，动词是 bring to mind， 让我们能够想起如何如何。以上是我们今天的内容，我是安娜，我们下次见咯。
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And please, we beg you, we implore you, we beseech you to join us again for our program next time. We'll have a really great time. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
See ya.